such a small circle of friends, and I have to use the microphone. The first part was dedicated to the stories of individual artists. Usually in lecture courses, they are presented by a special fragment of their artistic journey, the most inspiring part of it. And all the other artistic achievements are left in the background. And I wanted to talk about my favorite artists, some of which are presented at the Garage archive. And I think they will be interesting for you as well. We're approaching an era that represents the history of art of the post-Soviet Russian period. I wanted to move from individuals to the history of institutions that are largely responsible for the landscape of the artistic process that we are observing today. It's going to be a two-part narrative. And I don't know when it is that we meet next time. Is it going to be a Wednesday or a Thursday? We're going to be talking about the history of institutional processes in Russian art. At the same time, of course, I'm going to be showing you the works that were milestones indicative of the changes that occurred over the course of the decade that we're going to be talking about. The first slide that I have to show, 18 plus materials produced by foreign agent Anatoly Osmolovsky. And we are going to be talking about his works, him alongside others that we're going to be talking about today, was part of a generation that came to replace the previous generations of artists, including underground artists. They were young, carefree. They grew up during the perestroika periods. They did not accept boundaries. They understood art very differently to people of the previous generations. And what you see in front of you is one of the last exhibitions of the old times that brought together, as it were, during the Soviet period, all of the representatives of the cultural administration of Moscow, the representatives of party officials, the Union of Soviet Artists, a lot of bored, pompous faces. That will soon inhabit other places. And the best places will be taken by the more youthful people that came to replace them. To have a place to gather for this younger generation, a lot of those that had to do with the underground processes in Moscow and other cities of the Soviet Union, usually art critics by background. They took on this function of supporting carefully offering this curatorship support to the development of contemporary art in the Russian Federation in the Soviet Union that was about to be no more, because these processes started before the empire collapsed. Not too long before, one of the key figures of the process is, of course, Leonid Bazhanov, who passed away recently. But he managed to do so much in his lifetime that no negative process in the field of contemporary culture could never destroy. He belonged to a generation of post-war artists and art critics that grew in the context of freedom of the Thaw period. And like many during the 70s, they tried to legalize contemporary art in various formats. And Leonid Bazhanov, as a graduate of the art history faculty of the Moscow State University, was part of the Institute of art. He would translate texts on contemporary art from the West, and together with his colleagues Valery Turchin, he even published an extensive article, a review of contemporary artistic flows in the Contemporary Art Journal. As soon as it became possible, he quit his formal post and he takes a deep dive into the world of free cultural activities. A starting point for many back then was a decree from the Russian Federation High Council that the citizens of the Soviet Union, starting from that point on, had the right and the possibility to register so-called amateur unions in order to do business, as we would say today, to open accounts for these organizations, rent venues, receive profits, hire employees, and these could be any sort of organization. It could be a club of lovers of Siamese cats, or it could be a club of mountain cycle fans. Leonid Bazhanov took this opportunity. More so at the beginning of 1986, young artists, photographers turned to him, including Maria Serebryakova and Vladislav Yefimov, a photographer, and Maria's then husband, Anatoly Zhuravlyov, an artist himself. They asked Leonid to help them to create a structure that would organize exhibitions of contemporary photographers. Leonid Bazhanov gave it some thought and he said, well, we should aim higher. We should create a big union, a big organization with a lot of participants. And this is how they came up with the Hermitage Association. They talked about the possible venue for localizing this in the Hermitage Garden, but at the very last moment, Bazhanov and his co-founders, the co-founders of this association, were denied. So the center of this amateur association opened in a spacious gallery near the metro station called Belyaeva, Profsayuzная Street. And for a long time, this exhibition venue was associated with the Hermitage legacy. Having obtained this opportunity to exhibit in a municipal gallery, Bazhanov immediately organizes a highly intensive exhibition process to cover the entire summer of 1987. But what's most important, he programs the life of this union, not just when it came to exhibitions. He also included enlightenment as a mission for this organization. Of course, not everything that he was able to bring to the end. It did not last too long, but he always had great ambition in order to aim towards the highest accomplishments. In 1985-86, a series of exhibition halls opened across various districts of Moscow. It came about impacted by the perestroika period. It was getting the citizens accustomed to the visual culture. Very often they came up against the challenge of not being able to fill the halls with exhibits. And a lot of these municipal exhibition halls would offer the spaces to enthusiasts, the nonconformists, the ex-underground artists. In Peresvetov period, there was an exhibition hall, and Oktyabrskaya 26 was another one. There was lots of venues like this across the city, including the gallery in Profsoyuzная, in 100 Profsoyuzная. The first exhibition of the Hermitage presented the amazing world of contemporary art to the viewers, the hottest stuff, the trendiest, the most relevant youth art of Moscow. There was a grand opening, and very soon the hall was filled with young enthusiasts, and they would move around Moscow looking for new impressions. They were willing to travel quite a distance they could travel an hour by subway to get from Kashirka, the exhibition hall next to the oncology center, to Profsoyuzная. And then they could travel on towards Novoslobodskaya in order to attend a new performance or an exhibition at Velta Exhibition Space. Over the course of the entire summer, the Hermitage would open one exhibition after another. Thematic expositions of contemporary art, for instance, an exhibition dedicated to contemporary private spaces. There was another exhibition of a young Georgian abstract artist. There was a lot of activity happening. 1987, the summer was very intense, and there was an autumn exhibition that was called Retrospection of the Art of Moscow Artists, 57 to 87. It was a unique happening. Bazhanov and his colleagues, Leonid Talechkin and Oleg Loginov, he was more of a manager than the curator of this organization. They decided to present a full retrospective of contemporary arts of Moscow from the end of the 1950s leading up to our days. And they put in a tremendous effort. They didn't get much money from it. Again, I would point this fact out. Registering an amateur organization didn't mean that people would get a salary. So they would do it just driven by their own enthusiasm, on using their own funds, their own money. It was the beginning of September 1987. The main curator of this exhibition, Leonid Talechkin, did not come forward, come out to the guests. In fact, he was having a heart attack in the cellar of the building. Just so that you understand how much effort went into making this happen. A lot of documents have been kept from those times, the lists of those that worked on the project, a list of various artworks and names that had to be mentioned. And the list was so extensive that the exhibition had to be broken down into 3 separate parts. One of them opened, as I said, in September 1987. The second, dedicated to contemporary formats of visual culture, opened in October. At the same time, another smaller exhibition opened to represent the graphic works of nonconformists from 1957 to 1987. It's opened in an exhibition venue of the Cultural Center located at Petrovka. When I talk about these events of the summer and autumn 1987, you might get the impression of hard but fruitful effort. There was only a lack of money that impeded them, but that's not the case. In the process of preparing the first stage of the retrospective, the organizers and curators and managers of the Hermitage came up against a huge challenge because they were approached by representatives of controlling authorities. As you know, after the exhibition of 1962 in Manège, the chief cultural department by the Moscow City Council was established. And together with the representatives of the Soviet Union of Artists, they had to make a decision whether to allow or not allow the opening of an exhibition. And these officials could just ban an exhibition. And there are lots of examples of this actually happening. The opening of the retrospective was a big question mark. Not just when the organizers were threatened, but when during the opening, some ladies came and they said they were from this Department of Culture. They tried to ban the exhibition because there was a hall where you would see the works of Oscar Rabin, who was deprived of Soviet citizenship. And in another hall, there was a work by Igor Shilkovsky, who was also stripped of Soviet citizenship not too long before the retrospective opened for issuing the AZ magazine that was in fact anti-Soviet. Not a lot of people from this Department of Culture of the city of Moscow, nobody paid attention to them. One lady tried to block access to the exhibition hall, and Benedict Yurseyev, who then already had throat cancer, with his neck bandaged, he just walked past her, pushing her aside. It was there was some farce in this. Officials from the fading Soviet authority were trying to prohibit the exhibition and red light it. After the opening of the retrospective, some negative reviews appeared, some articles in the media, but that couldn't change anything. People from all over Moscow would come to have a look at this logical narratives from the Neonasova group to the Champions of the World group, Maria Serebrikova's photographs or installations by Anatoly Zhuravlyov. A classical exhibition, lots of artists were represented. A lot of these works are now in private and museum collections. The Hermitage organization laid the foundation for a number of years to come. In 1988, they had to close the Belayev exhibition space. Authorities asked them to leave the venue, but Leonid Bazhanov was hoping that one way or another, contemporary art would be supported. And between the important posts in his biography, he would work on organizing contemporary art courses at the Moscow State University. He organized individual exhibitions, etc., etc. The next character that confirms the idea that pioneers are always loners is Iosif Backstein, the creator of various institutional structures at the beginning, and in a historical perspective also becomes an icon of this institution. Joseph Backstein turned out to be one of these key figures of the late Soviet period. It's a person with an amazing biography, quite standard for a Soviet citizen. On the one hand, he went to school together with Alexander Melamid. They lived close to each other, but he decided not to be an artist. He went to a technical college and he defended a PhD in sociology in the 70s. Before that, he worked in a research institution working on sociological research of various types of production. He wanted to move to Israel, then he changed his mind. By mid-70s, when he was around 30 years old, he met the Moscow Conceptual School representatives and starting off as a guest, he became someone who frequented all of these conceptualist apartments. He participated in the collective actions group activities many times. And looking at the volumes, there are a lot of analytical texts that we can find by Joseph Backstein. He wrote them himself together with Monastyrsky and Kabakov. By mid-1980s, he becomes a full-fledged member of the Moscow Conceptual Circle. He would ensure logistics, he would cover all of the organizational matters, and he helped form an intellectual discourse around these amazing activities and initiatives, supported the very functioning of the regional conceptual school. A lot of people would mock him somewhat, particularly when he moved from workshop to workshop. In Arimonach Sergey's Vladimir Sorokin and Andrei Monastyrsky created this book in 1984, a translation of the Ministry of Money, and there were lists of the key characters. Every single one had a military rank assigned to them. The highest rank was, of course, Marshal Ilya Kabakov. Then there were generals, Nikita Alexeyev, nicknamed the Watch. Iosif Backstein was nicknamed Schnur. In the vocabulary of the Moscow Conceptual School, there came a Plato with the term Backstein function. It's a function of a person who always knows everything, who's always in the know, in the loop, and he retransmits all of the new flows, gossip, uh, innovations. And it's very far from his initial nickname. It was like someone who was always on the go. He knew everything. You could compare him to Mercury. Perhaps even earlier than Leonid Bozhanov, he knew that you could now register amateur associations. He wouldn't go for it himself, but he brought together his friends from the Moscow Conceptual School, and they decided to register an association. There was a club of dog lovers, and they wanted to call themselves the Club of Avant-Garde Artists. Backstein was selected as the one who had to in his suit and tie. He was the only one of the entire group who had a suit and tie. He had to go to the authorities and register this amateur union. Despite the fact that all of the key creative processes would evolve within the creative community and the champions of the world, particularly Svenglov, were most active, supported by Matrosov and others. For these creative-driven young authors, he was a sort of icebreaker that helped them break through official barriers. Joseph found it very easy to find a common language, just as Bozhanov, both with creative people and officials alike. It didn't matter when it happened, the golden 2000s or the end of the Soviet era. He was always good. He became the formal leader of the Club of Avant-Garde Artists. He was able to agree with exhibition venues, and for many years they had a base not far from the Avtozavodsk subway station. As we know, all of the exhibitions of the Club of Avant-Garde Artists were collegial in one way or another. The main block would bring the minds together with idea generation, but Joseph Backstein becomes more and more prominent in this context. He did an amazing job breaking down the walls with his intellectual charm and his drive and his visual convincing nature. He was able to rent the main swimming pool of the Saint-Denis Baths. He rented it for 10 days in order to organize an exhibition of the most recent works by the club participants, and the grand opening with a triumphal performance of the freed avant-garde. Backstein keeps the Club of Avant-Garde Artists afloat. The artistic community, challenged mostly by laziness, was trying to fall apart, but he was the one who would pull it together. Supported by younger colleagues, he would organize performances, for instance, in a suburban boat Boat 1987 was the name of the uh, performance right after the famous legendary Sotheby's auction. It demonstrated a curious landscape of the Soviet art of the time and the possibilities of contemporary Soviet infrastructure to be flexible enough in order to turn from ideological bans towards freedom of interaction with international partners. At the same time, a second exhibition of the Club of Avant-Garde Artists opens, and Joseph gets the opportunity to, just like many other Soviet citizens, to move beyond the country, to travel abroad. And of course, everybody was very excited. There was no need to get an exit visa anymore. And he starts to travel across Europe. He visits his friends in various countries across the globe. And among others, he visits some old friends from the 1970s Moscow clubs, a married couple, art critics of contemporary art, Victor and Margarita Tupitsiny. It soon becomes apparent that it was Joseph who could become an assistant to international curators and gather works and transportation of these works abroad. And in 1989, 1990, Joseph Backstein becomes an ambassador of Russian youth art to the United States of America. And the next exhibition that he organizes in Moscow, the Prospects of Conceptualism, that he fully curated, goes to Honolulu, where it opens in 1990. Joseph makes sure that it's a travel exhibition, and it went to 5 different states, and it went to the Duke University collection. Not because Duke University fell in love with Moscow conceptualism, but as it turned out, Joseph didn't have enough money to bring these works back. And after several months with Ronald Feldman's storage house, they then handed the works over to the university collection. And this is nothing to be ashamed of, forgetting that the works need to come back. Please note that everybody I'm talking about today and will be talking about next time were at a stage of the emergence of a profession that nobody ever had a chance to master before. Nobody knew how to sign contracts. Nobody knew how to negotiate with heads of museums on independent projects. Nobody knew how to build estimates. Nobody knew how much these works were worth. And these were pioneers. They were just creating this role of a curator, and they were mastering their professions on the go. Later on, they would become a source of invaluable information based on their own experience. They made their mistakes. They had these lessons learned. They knew how they were lied to. They knew how they deceived themselves. And they mastered this new profession, and all these amazing people then got the enjoyment out of it. They were able to put together amazing exhibitions. The Prospects of Conceptualism was the exhibition starting from which Joseph becomes a big curator. In December 1991, he realizes that organizing exhibitions under the trademark of the Club of Avant-Garde Artists doesn't make any more sense, and he tried to adapt the structure of the London Institute of Art to the post-Soviet context. It would be duplicated across certain American systems, for instance, the PS1 space in Queens in New York. In December 1991, right after, just before the Belavesh Agreement signing, Erosif Bachstein registered the Institute of Contemporary Art of Moscow, and it starts to operate with its headquarters in Selanka, and the first exhibition supported by IC Moscow happened in the Butyrka prison. Hopefully I'll have time to talk about that with you. These two stories about Leonid Bazhanov and Joseph Bachstein are indicative in the sense that each initiative started with a community proposal. Bazhanov perhaps would never found the Hermitage if the young artist didn't turn to him asking for support, and Bachstein would never have founded the Institute of Contemporary Art if he wasn't inspired by the Moscow conceptualist artists. The photograph that you see in front of you now, we see a completely different story. You see three young people, all artists, painters, representatives of the Moscow, the Soviet Golden Youth. Aidan Salakhova, Alexander Yakut, Yevgeny Mita. They were part of cinema, literature families. They never wanted to be curators. They were young people with a great income, with great social connections. And then at some point they received this proposal to head an artistic gallery that a businessman that they knew, Mikhail Kruk, he offered them the space for them to do something while he was thinking about the concept of a furniture store. That's how the first gallery came about. It wasn't the first one, in fact. It opened in 1989, and it was the third gallery. The first one was called Mars, and the second one that I don't want to mention at all. I would have to add a slide, another one. It was a third gallery that opened in Moscow, but it was the first in the sense that it was a central gallery. It was located in the center of the city. It was very popular, very much in vogue. There was no restaurant culture the way we know it today, and going to a gallery would could be compared to going to the Patriarchy Pond. It was located in the Strasnoy Boulevard. The curators of this first gallery, they were never owners, they were curators, would create an amazing atmosphere within the gallery of a festive mood and opportunities that opened up. And they really did get lucky in the sense that it opened in 1989 and it was able to survive and go through the most successful years in the 90s, where there was huge demand for this type of art. A crisis hits in 1991 and 1992, and the gallery had to close. But over the course of the 3 years of its existence, they were able to host a lot of various exhibitions. New names emerged of artists that were previously unknown. They weren't part of any official structures or the Moscow underground, and they had no opportunity to exhibit their works. Aidan Salahova was one of them. She was a co-curator of the first gallery, and it was in the first gallery that she gets the opportunity to exhibit her personal works. So very sophisticated images of Oriental beauties surrounded by these sober feminist depictions from medical manuals dedicated to the pathology of pregnancy and childbirth. The first gallery would easily combine the freedom of bohemian existence and the luxury and a radical nature of some of the exhibitions that could shock the viewers. But of course was well received by the Golden Youth and their friends that were well familiar with all types of extreme expression. The entrance was quite remarkable. Not a lot of official buildings could boast these white walls and the marble floor, this semi-destroyed portal over the door. As one of the reviews in 1990 said, you want to come to the gallery just to have a refreshing drink at the reception. It was a unique space that would successfully combine market activities, bohemian activities, and an interest to contemporary artistic processes. In 1992, when the crisis peaked, the first gallery had to be closed. Aidan Salahova was an independent and a very strong woman, and she would not be stopped. That's why she opened a gallery named after herself in a workshop not far from the Sokol metro station. Sometimes she would repeat herself throughout a number of the interviews. The income of her gallery over the 1990s, from 1993 to 1999, was 0 rubles. She would say that it would be great after the crisis of when the art market picked up after the crisis. She said it would be awesome to organize an exhibition of real contemporary artists. And they ask her, who do you mean? And she would say, Shishkin, Ayvazovsky, Halenov. These are the artists that helped contemporary art survive during the crisis decade, survive and even bring some bread home, help artists buy materials necessary for their work. The galleries that worked for galleries that made no money, just as the curators, large-scale institutional leaders, they would just start this process of training and understanding the profession. And when young people ask me what happened with institutionalized criticism in 1990s, I have to say it didn't exist. There was no institution, and Aidan Salakhov and other gallerists of the period would build these infrastructural entities together with the artists themselves that had to exhibit themselves. They had to have some food. They had to work. That's why Aidan Salakhov and many others would sell Shishkin, Ivazovsky, and Polenov. They would also wash the floors. They would paint the walls and the spaces. They would have side gigs and jobs that would help them stay afloat and support the production of more complex pieces. The experience of the crisis years really helped strengthen the system. Those that survived 1993 easily survived 1998. Going back to Leonid Bazhanov, after a break, he comes back with grandiose news to the lovers of contemporary art in 1990. He gets the support of Tatiana and Sergei Nikitiny, a couple of bards. He convinced the deputies of the Moscow City Council that they need to have a contemporary center of art as any other European city. They have to have a cluster, a hub that would help push forward the cultural industry. He received small houses set in a triangle that were set for demolition in Malaya Ikimanka. In 1991, there was a grand opening of the Center of Contemporary Art located at Yakimanka Street. This was just one of the buildings that had three big exhibition spaces, a room for the employees, a ticket office, everything that's necessary. But all of the other buildings were kept vacant. Leonid Bazhanov was always optimistic. He was convinced that nothing is impossible, and he started to organize therapeutical discussions with his art critic friends. They at first hesitantly and then more and more steadily followed their lead. Another gallery opens up. Selected specifically for the space. And these were very different galleries. A gallery of naive art, headed by Sergei Tarabadov, Studio 20, the gallery that worked headed by the future wife of Leonid Bazhanov, Tatiana Rostopchina, and the curator of Studio 20 was an independent curator, a famous Russian art critic, Irina Gorlova. A media art, video art gallery was also located there. Nina Zaretsky was the head of the gallery, and then she had a TV show on the third channel of Central Television called TV Gallery. These buildings also hosted other galleries, for instance, 1.0 that was curated by Vladimir Levashov. Unlike other galleries, it did receive financing from a private investor, so it could afford the most complex, the most confusing expositions. The the space you will have seen before. I showed you this installation by Gutov and Andrei in the 1960s. Let's talk one more time about love. That's the name of the installation. You can see the architecture of an old Moscow house, well restored, doors, and the parquet floor. There would be other works as well that were bolder, more politicized. The entrance into the central hall would be blocked by a brick wall with the slogan, "There will never be communism." It's an existential hysteria rather than a happy satisfaction sentiment. The Center of Contemporary Arts was opened for different types of exhibitions. Galleries that were part of the cluster would agree more often than not, or the heads of the center, that they would get the venue. In 1992, Bazhanov, who founded the center, leaves it. He becomes essentially a state official, joining the Ministry of Culture of the Russian Federation. He became the head of the departments of art. And thanks to this position in the bureaucratic cultural management system, he was able to achieve even more, having left the Center of Contemporary Arts to his colleague and friend, a young art critic who suddenly became a curator of contemporary Russian art, Viktor Mizyanov. He wasn't so much interested in exhibition activities. He was more interested in publication practices. And starting from 1993, the Center of Contemporary Art would employ mostly intellectual laboratories. There was an artistic magazine editing group. There would be meetings organized with representatives of international contemporary art. It had a life of its own, quiet, remarkable, and intensive. But as I said, calling this, when I'm saying all of this, it seems like there was a lot of money in this world. There was no money at all, in fact. Over the whole course of the Art Moscow Fair existence, that ceased to be in autumn 1999. It existed from 1996. $57,000 were the profits that they made over the whole course of their existence. There was a joke that would go around coming from one of the art critics in an article dedicated to the art myth exhibition. Finally, Russia has a non-commercial artistic fair. A lot of the spaces, including the Center of Contemporary Art or the so-called galleries, or the Institute of Contemporary Art, essentially these were all platforms for the development of contemporary art. They couldn't become a source of monetizing. An institute without any exterior support could never initiate large research activities. The Center of Contemporary Art that also needed funding had a rather modest place in exhibition planning. When it comes to gallerists, their story was way more exciting. They had the opportunity to engage private funding. Gallery 1.0 was one of such spaces curated by Vladimir Levashov, a known historian of the history of photography. He teaches at the High School of Economics, and he would organize the most mind-blowing and labor-intensive exhibitions. Not a single one of these exhibitions could be imagined as something that's commercial. They are interested to have a look at, they are interesting to discuss, but not to purchase. Contemporary art in post-Soviet Russia is a closed club of like-minded people that wasn't very much interested in external viewers. And these internal processes, these circle of artists would move around a small number of galleries and centers of contemporary art, not noticing the serious changes that were happening in the economy and the politics of the country. And of course, it was a big paradox when even the most radical projects would appear at a time of the collapse of a country. This tragedy of the people that had lost everything. But the first half of the 90s, marked by the appearance of the first institutionalized decisions, had a lot of energy, a lot of dynamics, despite the lack of funding for development and the most complex external context in the world during the presidency of Boris Yeltsin. The galleries that don't sell anything looked odd, to say the least. And nonetheless, they were perceived by artists as a safe haven where you could embody your perhaps modest but still ambition. The gallerists go forward with projects that have no financial prospects whatsoever, and aesthetically, they are so revolutionary in nature that it's hard to conceive the possibility of these being exhibited at group exhibitions by international curators or Russian curators. But nonetheless, they would take these on and these would become a success together with their gallerist friends. And this is what happened with Maria Serebrikova from the very first exhibitions at the Hermitage associations. She showed a lot of talent, a lot of wit when it came to exhibition solutions. And in 1991, she starts to collaborate with Irina Pegada's school gallery. She focused primarily on contemporary photography with a small focus on other media, but she would never exhibit graphical works or paintings. So what was important to her was everything that had to do with the names of the best photographers of the 20th century. Serebrikova exhibits a strange project in the gallery called The State of Things, and it becomes a hit. It's a very risky project with an unpredictable viewer reaction. In the photographs that are located up above, close to the ceiling, we see some buildings, houses, warehouses, somewhere lost in the fields. And because the photographs are so high up, we can see that all of these houses are raised on pillars. Are they drawn? Are they there? You can't really make out. But then there is a space, a surrealistic space that forms. Its intervention changes the space, transforms it. The photographs themselves are on these wooden walking sticks, and there was a duplication in the theme, and this only emphasized their surrealistic nature. Irina Grantsova, again at the school gallery, takes a different route. She's not trying to create an artistic work. This was the first exhibition that intended to exhibit merchandise rather than works of art. Merchandise wasn't a concept that existed back then, but nonetheless, and the guest would ask, where's art? Where's the art? And then they would realize that they are in a commercial shop. In fact, that was something that was very innovative at the time. Going to a commercial shop was a special experience. You could buy a box of chocolates and there was an abundance that people weren't used to, or a pack of tea. Irina Grantsova picked up the sentiment in society and in the first years after the collapse of the Soviet Union, you would feel that past friendships would fade away, giving space to talks of money and other unpleasant matters. Grantsova is trying to capture the era. At her commercial exhibition, you could buy a pillow with your favorite artist's face. The artists themselves could buy a pillow with their own face. You could choose a T-shirt with your favorite artist. You could buy a calendar with your favorite artist or a matchbox. The production of these goods didn't cost too much, but it turned everything into a big party, this reminiscing on the past. The school was risking in the sense that the Grantsova's project wouldn't really look too convincing. The L Gallery was formed on the basis of another municipal exhibition hall. And it worked predominantly with conceptual artists, Nikita Alexeyev, Viktor Skersis, the Moscow Conceptual School Circle artists, Ivan Chekhov, the Med Hermeneutics group, and for quite some time, it would attract attention by the fact that there were two art critics at the head, Irina Romanova and Elena Silina. Alongside gallery exhibitions, she would also organize group travel exhibitions. And then she broke away from her partner gallerist. The L Gallery is the beginning of the name of two Lenas, and Lyubov Saprikina, who was the director of the exhibition, says there were three L's, and that's why the gallery was called the L Gallery. Having broken away from her co-curator, she opens her own gallery in a rented apartment that was only 20 square meters at Чистые пруды at the end of 1993. By that time, most of the players had made a name for themselves, and it was very bold of her to go into this type of initiative at the moment where the crisis consequences were really hitting in, 1993 being the most challenging year when inflation was through the roof, and people's buying capacity would keep dropping. During that period, another gallery came about that was quite successful. It opened in Moscow in 1990 in the outskirts of the city next to the Preobrazhenskaya Plощadь metro station, opened by a young banker, Vladimir Ovcharenko, one of the co-founders of the European Trade Bank, and he opened it specifically for his wife, Regina, and then her husband fell in love with contemporary art just as much as he loved banking. He took over as the head of the gallery. The first exhibitions at the gallery were quite pompous, but they didn't attract the attention of professionals. Contemporary art didn't have a wide audience, and it still doesn't. Contemporary art as a language system for the Soviet and the post-Soviet um, layman is Chinese writing. It means absolutely nothing, just as Kandinsky, Tatlin, and Malevich. Contemporary art mostly relies on professional reviews that gain more and more importance. The Regina Gallery becomes popular when a young sculptor that came to Moscow from Kiev takes it on, Oleg Kulik, and he revolutionized not just the exhibition policy of Regina, but the wider Moscow context as well. He once again indicated the fact that an institution that calls itself a gallery but that does not sell anything essentially works similar to a center of contemporary art with minimal budgets, just as a self-organization that survives through whatever the artist is able to put into it. And during the first half of the 1990s, they dissolve all of these differences between various institutions. Everybody's working towards the same cause on the various parts of the artistic landscape. You could exhibit traditional paintings of Soviet painters in such a way that the enlightened Moscow public would be wowed because that was one of Kulik's first curator projects, the Russian landscape, it was called, something like that. He agreed with the authors of the paintings that it's going to be a landscape exhibition, but when these Moscow artists came to the opening, they would be horrified to see that there is no exhibition. Their works are just set along the walls. In order to see the exhibition, like a museum worker, you had to go through a whole heap of these landscape paintings to find something that one liked. There were exhibitions like this, and then there were the more radical exhibitions of the toughest contemporary art. The Day of Knowledge, for instance, this was the first exhibition of the expropriation of the territory of art movement. The Regina Gallery, thanks to Oleg Kulik and the boldness of the founder, Vladimir Ovcharenko, it took on some of the methods of the Moscow performance movement, the art of the scandal, mental provocation, and very interesting plays on meanings. One of the most innocent exhibition that's astounded the Moscow artistic community was called The Surroundings of the Regina Gallery. The author was Monastyrsky, allegedly. If you were there for my lecture on Andrei Monastyrsky, you will remember what the story was about. Kulik, as asked by Monastyrsky, recreated some of the objects from the surroundings of the Regina Gallery, and the key elements weren't the objects that Monastyrsky selected, but the parts of the soil that was set on the floor of the gallery. So the nouveau riche and passers-by were able to appropriate the legacy of the esoteric school of Moscow, conceptualism. Another project, it was a multi-fragment activity, a festival of animalistic projects, and every week the gallery would open up installations that in one way or another engaged an animal. Anatoly Osmolovsky, foreign agent, created an installation called The Leopards Break into the Temple and Break a Sacred Vessels. These are domesticated animals. There would always be someone to watch them. They couldn't find leopards, and they used cheetahs instead. Wild animals would associate with revolutionary strategies, the Red Revolution of the Bolsheviks, the Black Revolution of the fascists, and the surrealistic revolution of the surrealists. And the people, Moscow people, would find themselves in a cage when they came to see the new works of the radical artists. The most resounding event took place, organized by the Nikolai Group. Nobody knew what the Nikolai Group was. It was called Piglet Gives Out Gifts. So when they came to the gallery during the opening, they were surprised to see that the gallery was empty. Not far from the entrance, it was blocked by a wall with a little window in it, but you couldn't go any further in. And there was a monitor that would play horrifying scenes. A pig was killed and dissected in the gallery. This drama took place a few hours before the exhibition, so everybody who came to the vernissage would get a little bag of pork. There was a scandal, not just in the artistic community. Communists, environmentalists, animal protectors filed a suit against the gallery. First, they went to the police, and then in the gallery archive, there is a great explanation from the curator of the gallery, Mila Bredikina, that they didn't do anything criminal. They even paid the butchers the famous butcher from Danilowski market called Nikolai. They received a monetary compensation for putting the pig to death without any pain. The Regina Gallery, following the actionist movement of the beginning of the 90s, would raise questions about the ethics, about the boundaries of contemporary art, about crossing boundaries, about transitional times. When the country was collapsing, killing a pig in a gallery, how bad is that? Uh, every second person in the country eats pork almost every time, every day. The questions that were raised by the curators and the founders of the Regina Gallery weren't easy to answer. There was a split in the artistic community, but it wasn't the last scandal. The next scandal broke out in the summer of 1992. The exhibition was initially planned as something, the anthropology of timidity or art from the first hands. Nothing promised anything scandalous, but provocation still worked. All of these wonderful works, the big ones, the heavy ones, the light ones, weren't being hung on the walls. They were held by people, by men, people behind the wall. It turned out that the works being held by young soldiers from the military. At that point, they were the most vulnerable class of the post-Soviet society, and the officers responsible for the life and the health of the young soldiers sold them to the banker for them to hold these heavy sculptures by Orlov or these smaller works by Ilya Kabakov from the Shower series. I guess we're going to wrap up at this. The history of the Excel gallery does require a separate chapter. 5 minutes isn't going to be enough. During our next meeting, we'll have a very intensive discussion of the processes of the decade. I'll try to be faster. Perhaps you have some questions.